Part 1. Voyage of the Mayflower. The Pilgrim story is one of America's most important and most loved founding stories. This dramatic tale of courage and perseverance in the face of hardship and danger has inspired generations.
In this episode, we will learn about the religious persecution in England, the hazardous Mayflower voyage, and the 1620 landing in America.
This story is based on the true account of events as recorded in the book by William Bradford, Bradford's History of Plymouth Plantation. My name is William Bradford. The people that we refer to as the Pilgrims desired nothing more than to worship God according to the simplicity of the gospel and to be ruled by God's word. However, our tyrannical government chose to use their power to persecute these poor servants of God.
The government has used every means to persecute the believers, even charging some of our group with rebellion and high treason.
We just can't continue to live here. Our group is being hunted down and persecuted on every side. Our previous troubles are like a small flea bite compared to what we now face.
Some have already been taken and locked up in prison. Others are having their houses watched night and day.
I believe we have all heard the reports that there is religious freedom in Holland for all men. Seeing we are all being mistreated in this way, and that there is no hope of continuing on here, can we all agree that we must relocate to Holland?
Hooray!
Then it is settled. We shall all move to Holland.
There were two different groups of Bible believers in England at this time. Both groups disagreed with the form of worship imposed upon them by the Church of England. The first group, the Puritans, tried to reform or purify the Church of England and bring about a form of worship that was less objectionable to them.
The other group, the Separatists, believed that the Church of England had strayed so far that it could not be reformed. This group separated from the Church of England and worshipped God as the Bible commands. The Pilgrims, who eventually came to America, were Separatists, not Puritans, and it was the Separatists that were being persecuted by the government.
In deciding to leave our native country and relocate to Holland, it means that we will all be leaving behind our land, our businesses, our friends, and our relatives. We will need to learn a new language, and we don't know how we will be able to make a living there.
This plan seems to be a desperate adventure and a misery worse than death.
But this need not discourage us, for we are set on the ways of God. We just need to rest on His promises.
But even though we could not stay in England, we were not permitted to leave the country. We had to find secret means of transportation and to bribe the shipmasters and pay extraordinary fares for our passage. And yet, we were many times betrayed and reported to the authorities and had our belongings seized.
I have some encouraging news. The godly courage and Christian behavior of our little group of believers has left a deep impression in the minds of many. Although some have left our group because of these conflicts, many more are joining us with fresh courage, and that is a great encouragement.
In the end, we were all able to make our way to Holland, some at one time and some at another. Some arrived in one place and some in another, but eventually we all met together in Holland with much praise and rejoicing. We all lived in the city of Leyden, Holland for 11 or 12 years. During that time, some of our group began to seriously consider what kind of future they would have here.
Holland is a difficult place to live. Many want to join us but cannot endure the hard labor and difficult situation that we have here.
Many of our group are growing old and cannot endure these great hardships.
Even the children here are forced to perform heavy labors. Many are becoming decrepit in their early youth.
I fear we are in danger of disbanding altogether.
These are all valid concerns. After much thought and study, we are proposing that we relocate to the vast and unpopulated land of America. That land has been reported to be fruitful and well fit for habitation.
No, no, no. We should relocate to Guinea. That country has a hot climate and is blessed with a perpetual spring. It is flourishing with plants of all kinds without requiring any hard work.
Guinea indeed would be more fruitful and pleasant, but along with the hot climate would also come many serious diseases and other difficulties which would not agree with our English bodies.
At length the conclusion was reached. We would live in America as a distinct body by ourselves in a more northerly part which is called by another name, New England. This location would be wholly secluded, so there would be no fear of government persecution. But before we proceeded, we had a solemn meeting and took a day to pray and seek the Lord for His direction. Those that were planning to go with us prepared to leave with all speed. They sold off their estates and put their money into the common stock, which was set aside for purchasing general provisions.
Our small ship, which we hired here in Holland, is fitted and ready to go. The second ship, which was hired in London, is also ready to go. So as your pastor, I would like to encourage you with the Word of God. My text is taken from Ezra 8:21. And there at the river by Ahava, I proclaimed a fast, that we might humble ourselves before our God, and seek of Him a safe journey for us, and for our children, and for all our goods.
Our entire group was not able to fit into the two ships, so Pastor Robinson chose to stay and shepherd those that remained behind. And so, falling down on his knees, and all of us with him, with watery cheeks, he commended us with the most fervent prayers to the Lord. And then, with mutual embraces and many tears, we took leaves of one another, which proved to be the last time many of us would see each other on this earth. So we left that pleasant city which had been our resting place for nearly 12 years, but we knew we were pilgrims and did not look at those things, but lifted up our eyes toward heaven, our dearest country. On August 5th, 1620, the two ships, the Mayflower and the Speedwell, were put out to sea. However, we had not traveled far when Shipmaster Reynolds called out from the smaller ship, the Speedwell.
This ship is so leaky that I dare not go further out to sea until she is mended.
So both ships turned around and headed back to Plymouth, England, where the Speedwell was examined and repaired.
All right, listen to me. Some leaks were found and mended. All the workmen agree that she is satisfactory, and we can now head back out into the ocean without any fear.
And so 10 days later, on August 15th, 1620, with good hopes, the two ships were put out to sea once again. We were fully convinced that we would not experience any more problems. However, it turned out otherwise.
We have traveled a mere 300 miles, and this ship is again so leaky that we must either return at once or sink. I can scarcely keep her afloat, even with much pumping.
We consulted with the masters of both ships and concluded that both the Speedwell and the Mayflower should again turn back to Plymouth, England. However, after a thorough examination of the Speedwell, no leak could be found.
This ship is just too weak. She will never prove to be adequate for the voyage. You need to abandon the Speedwell and proceed with just the Mayflower.
Let's take out as many provisions from the Speedwell as we can fit onto the Mayflower. Then we'll see how many additional people we can squeeze onto the Mayflower and who should be sent back to London.
On September 16th, 1620, after a delay of nearly 6 full weeks from our first departure, we made another sad parting. The Speedwell was sent back to London, and the Mayflower began her voyage for the third time, now with 102 passengers squeezed onto the lower deck.
I'm not complaining about having to stay behind. The many troubles that have come about are a bad omen regarding the safety of this trip.
The year is now so far spent that the time of their arrival in New England will be very late in the season and hardly before winter.
And so, like Gideon's army, the small number was divided.
As if the Lord thought these few were too many for the great work he had for them to do.
Afterward, it was found that the leakiness of the Speedwell was due to sabotage. Before the voyage, the ship had been refitted with a mast that was too large for her hull, and on this mast had been hung too many sails. Her hull was not strong enough to bear the force of so many sails, and the tremendous force of the mast on her small hull had caused her to leak.
This had all been deliberately done by the cunning deceit of the ship's master and his men. They had been hired to stay a whole year in New England, and they disliked the agreement, so they had plotted this strategy to free themselves from the agreement. This fact was known only afterwards and was openly confessed by some of the mariners. It was confirmed by the fact that the Speedwell was later sold and returned to her original mast and sails, and made many voyages to the great profit of her owners for many years.
I must tell you of a special work of God's providence which occurred on our voyage. There was a very profane young man, one of the seamen, with a strong able body, which made him all the more proud and haughty.
Hey, you I'm going to throw half of you overboard before we get to New England. Then I shall have a big party with all your provisions.
If he were gently reproved, he would curse and swear all the more bitterly.
Sir, we would be greatly appreciative if you would refrain from using such language.
Well, if you don't like my language, madam, you can
Ho, 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 ho.
But it pleased God that before we were even halfway across the sea, this man was smitten with a terrible disease, which caused him to die in a painful and desperate manner. And so, this profane seaman was the first to be thrown overboard. Thus, his curses upon God's children landed upon his own head. Even his fellow seamen were astonished at the turn of events, and attributed it to be the just hand of God upon him. On November 11th, 1620, after 66 days at sea, the Mayflower arrived in America at the place which is called Cape Cod. When it was made known to the passengers that they had arrived, there was much rejoicing.
We have now arrived in a good harbor and have been brought safely to land. Let us all fall to our knees and thank the great God of heaven, for he has brought us over the vast and furious ocean, delivering us from all of its perils, and set our feet on the firm and stable earth once again.
However, having passed over the vast ocean, and having all the preparation troubles behind us, we had no friends to welcome us, no inns to shelter our weather-beaten bodies, no houses to rest in, no towns or villages in which to seek help. We were alone in a vast wilderness, with winter soon approaching.
We have sailed too far north. We will not be coming ashore where we intended.
But we have a land patent that only allows us to settle in the northern part of the Virginia colony.
Our supplies of food and water are diminished. We can sail no further.
If we settle here where we have no land patent, won't we be guilty of treason?
No legal document can take precedence over our survival.
The first day we spent drafting the Mayflower Compact. It's important to note that the only reason the king granted them their land patent was not so they could have religious freedom. He had no interest in that. The whole thing was a business venture that the stockholders, and of course the king, would hopefully profit from.
The Pilgrims owned stock in the company whose purpose was to build a successful colony, where it just so happened that they could worship God the way they wanted. But because they landed off course, the passengers were no longer bound by the terms of the land patent.
This meant that they didn't have any rules or any way to keep themselves together in a functioning group. No one was officially in charge, so they drew up an agreement that they would stay together in what they called a civil body politic while they established a new colony.
The Pilgrims knew that early settlements in the New World had failed because of the lack of government. So they hashed out this agreement by consensus of the majority. All the adult males on the ship signed it, so they all owned shares in the company that was creating this new colony. The Mayflower Compact remained the governing document of the settlement for over 70 years.
After signing the Mayflower Compact, we chose, or rather confirmed, Mr. John Carver as our governor for that year. He was known as a godly man and was well respected.
Men, there is a large sailing boat called a shallop that has been stowed in the ship's lower deck. Get her out so we can explore the coast and locate a good place where we can settle.
I have some bad news. The carpenters have reported that because the Mayflower encountered so much rough, stormy weather on our voyage here, that the shallop was badly damaged. It is going to take some time to repair her and make her seaworthy again.
Governor Carver, while the shallop is being repaired, some men and I would like to volunteer to go out and explore the coast on foot.
There may be danger in this attempt, but it is already November 15th, and the winter is quickly approaching. Gather 16 well-armed men and set out. Captain Miles Standish will lead you.
Look at this cleared field. It looks like someone planted corn here this summer.
What are these heaps of sand? Someone patted the sand down with their hands.
Go ahead and dig into some of these mounds, men. Let's see what's inside.
Look at this. The Indians buried baskets filled with corn.
Look at all the colors. I've never seen anything like this before. This corn still looks fresh and good.
Let's take some of the corn with us back to the Mayflower and rebury the rest.
We are like the 10 spies that carried the fruits of the Promised Land back to show the people of Israel. There was much rejoicing when the men returned with fresh corn.
Hooray!
After the shallop was repaired, we set out again for a better look at that place. Unfortunately, the harbor was not deep enough for a large ship like the Mayflower. However, a very important discovery was made at this place, for we found more corn and also beans of various colors. We took much of the corn and beans with us, planning to repay the Indians when we were able, which we did about 6 months later.
I would like to make a special note about God's provision here. Because we found the corn and beans, we therefore had seed to plant the next spring. If we had not found the corn and beans, we all might have starved. The seed which we brought from England did not produce anything in this climate and soil, but the Lord is never absent from his own people in their hour of greatest need. Let his holy name be praised.
Thanks for watching the Bible Brick channel. If you liked this video, please click like and subscribe below. And check out our other videos. You can find links to all our videos on BibleBrick.com. That's Bible-Brick.com.